The jets moved at dawn, not just Benin's, but across borders, repositioned like chess pieces on a board most of the world hasn't been watching closely enough. What started as street protests in Cotonou has mutated into something far more sinister, and right now, Benin is teetering on the edge of chaos that could reshape West Africa's entire power structure. This isn't just unrest. This is the prelude to something darker, and the whispers coming out of intelligence circles are chilling. Foreign hands are pulling strings, and what happens next could ignite the region. Benin, a country that's managed to stay relatively stable while neighbors burned through coups and civil wars, is now facing its most dangerous hour. The streets are flooded with protesters, not just angry citizens but organized groups whose movements suggest coordination beyond spontaneous rage. Military convoys have been spotted in unusual formations, and the kind of chatter that precedes a coup is vibrating through encrypted channels. But here's where it gets wild. This might not be homegrown. ECOWAS and NATO, institutions that rarely make headlines in African internal politics unless something catastrophic is brewing, are now being named in the same breath as Benin's unraveling. That's not coincidence. That's geopolitical maneuvering dressed up as concern. The question isn't whether external forces are involved. The question is how deep they're in and what they stand to gain. Benin sits in a region where influence equals control, and control equals resources, trade routes, and strategic military positioning. If this government falls, it won't just be about who takes power in Porto Novo. It'll be about who gets to reshape the balance of power across the entire West African corridor. And right now, the players circling Benin aren't just regional, they're global. Is this the turning point or the start of something darker? Drop your take, because what comes next is even more unreal. Fighter jets don't just reposition for show. When assets move like that, it means someone is preparing for escalation. Reports are surfacing that military equipment is being shuffled across multiple African nations, not just Benin. That's the kind of coordination you see before interventions, not protests. And if ECOWAS is involved, it means the regional bloc is either preparing to stabilize or preparing to install. Either way, sovereignty is about to become negotiable, and Benin's people might wake up one morning to realize their revolution was hijacked before it even finished. The streets know something the headlines haven't caught up to yet. There's a tension in the air that goes beyond frustration with governance. It's the kind of tension that comes when people sense they're being used as props in a larger script. And the military, they're watching, waiting, calculating. Some say factions within the armed forces are already aligned with opposition movements. Others say foreign advisors are embedded deeper than anyone wants to admit. What's clear is that the state's grip is slipping, and the vacuum is being eyed by forces who won't let it stay empty for long. This wasn't supposed to be Benin's story. It was supposed to be the stable one, the cautionary success in a region plagued by instability. But history doesn't care about your reputation when your borders become valuable real estate in a proxy game. And right now, Benin is valuable. Its ports, its position, its potential to tilt regional alliances. All of it is up for grabs. The world is watching, even if the cameras aren't rolling yet. Intelligence agencies are tracking every movement. Diplomats are making quiet calls. And somewhere, decisions are being made about what kind of Benin emerges from this crisis, if it emerges intact at all. What no one expected was how fast it escalated. What no one predicted was how many foreign fingerprints would start showing up. And what no one can answer yet is whether this ends in reform, revolution, or something far uglier. Benin is standing at the crossroads, and the path it takes won't just decide its future. It'll send shockwaves across the continent. This is where sovereignty gets tested. This is where power moves in shadows. And this is where the world finds out if Benin falls or fights back. The jets weren't supposed to be there, but they showed up anyway, cutting through African skies with a purpose that had nothing to do with training exercises or routine patrols. Foreign fighter jets, repositioned with surgical precision, hovering just close enough to remind everyone that what's happening in Benin isn't just Benin's problem anymore. This is the moment a national crisis became a global calculation, and right now, the people of Benin are waking up to a reality they didn't vote for. Their future is being negotiated in rooms they'll never enter, by powers they never invited. What started as political instability, protests, and internal fractures has escalated into something far more complex and far more dangerous. Benin, a small West African nation that's managed to avoid the chaos that's consumed its neighbors, is now the center of a geopolitical storm. And the players circling aren't regional diplomats or African Union mediators. They're heavyweights. ECOWAS and NATO, two institutions that don't typically share operational space, are now reportedly coordinating behind the scenes, using air power and intelligence assets in ways that suggest this isn't about observation. This is about influence. This is about control. And Benin just became the board. The presence of those jets is a signal, loud and unmistakable. It tells the government in Porto Novo that their sovereignty is negotiable. It tells opposition movements that they have potential backers if they play their cards right. And it tells the Beninese people that their revolution, if that's what this becomes, will be shaped by forces far beyond their streets. This isn't just about who leads Benin tomorrow. It's about who gets to decide what kind of Benin exists in the next decade, and whether that nation will be independent or indebted. Is this intervention disguised as stability, or stability disguised as intervention? Drop your take, because the line between the two just disappeared. ECOWAS has always positioned itself as Africa's stabilizer, the regional bloc that steps in when democracies falter. But its track record is complicated. Sometimes it defends the people. Sometimes it defends the establishment. And when NATO enters the equation, the entire calculus changes. NATO doesn't move assets into African airspace out of charity. It moves them because strategic interests are at stake, and those interests rarely align with what's best for the people on the ground. So when intelligence sources start whispering that these two forces are coordinating, you have to ask, coordinating for what? To prevent a coup, or to ensure the right coup happens? Benin's institutions are being bypassed in real time. Decisions that should be made in parliament, in the streets, through dialogue and protest, are instead being made in intelligence briefings and military strategy sessions. The sovereignty that Benin fought for decades ago is slipping through the cracks, not because it's being taken by force, but because it's being managed, controlled, reframed as something that needs external oversight. And the terrifying part? Most of the world won't even notice until it's done. The streets of Cotonou are still packed with protesters, still loud with demands for change. But above them, literally and figuratively, another layer of power is operating. Air assets don't just watch. They intimidate. They prepare. They send a message to anyone thinking about making a move without permission. And right now, the message is clear. Benin's crisis is no longer a domestic issue. It's a case study in how modern imperialism operates, not with colonial maps and occupation forces, but with intelligence networks, airspace dominance, and the quiet coordination of institutions that claim to protect democracy while deciding who gets to practice it. What no one expected was how fast the situation would attract global attention. What no one predicted was how quickly Benin would go from a footnote in West African politics to a flashpoint in a much larger power struggle. And what no one can answer yet is whether the people of Benin will have any say in what comes next, or whether they'll wake up one day to realize their fate was decided in boardrooms and military bases thousands of miles away. This is where sovereignty dies, not with a bang, but with a coordinated flyover. This is where nations lose control of their own narratives, their own futures, their own revolutions. And this is where Benin finds out if it's still a country that governs itself, or just another piece on someone else's chessboard. The jets are watching. The world is waiting. And Benin is running out of time to decide what kind of nation it wants to be, if that choice is even still its own. Ibrahim Traoré just put the entire region on notice. While Benin burns and foreign jets circle overhead, the young revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso is doing what no one expected him to do this early in the game. He's mobilizing. His forces are on heightened readiness, not for defense, but for defiance. And the message he's sending is crystal clear. If foreign powers think they can intervene in West Africa without consequence, they're about to find out how wrong they are. This isn't just about Benin anymore. This is about drawing a line in the sand, and Traoré just dared the West to cross it. Traoré is built different, and the world is finally understanding why. Since taking power in Burkina Faso, he's been unapologetically anti-imperialist, kicking out French forces, rejecting Western military partnerships, and aligning himself with leaders who believe Africa's problems should be solved by Africans. He's young, he's sharp, and he's not interested in playing the diplomatic games that kept his predecessors in check. So when Benin's crisis started attracting ECOWAS coordination and NATO whispers, Traore didn't sit back and watch. He moved, and his move just changed everything. His forces aren't just on alert, they're positioning. Intelligence suggests that Burkina Faso's military is being readied for rapid deployment, not within its own borders, but potentially beyond them. That's not defensive posturing. That's a warning shot. Traore knows what's at stake. If Benin falls to a foreign-backed intervention, it sets a precedent. It tells every government in the region that sovereignty is conditional, that independence is negotiable, and that the moment you step out of line, external forces will step in to restore order. And Traore isn't about to let that happen without a fight. Is this the moment West Africa splits into rival blocs? Or is Traore bluffing? Drop your take, because what comes next could redefine the entire region. The timing couldn't be more volatile. Benin is already on the brink, its government struggling to maintain control, while protesters flood the streets and military factions calculate their next moves. Now add Traore into the equation, a leader who's already proven he'll confront Western influence head-on, and you've got the recipe for a regional flashpoint. If ECOWAS or NATO-backed forces move openly into Benin, Traore has signaled he won't stand idle. And that means the crisis could explode beyond Benin's borders, dragging in countries that have spent years trying to avoid direct confrontation with the West. This isn't just about ideology. It's about survival. Traore knows that if foreign powers can intervene in Benin today, they can intervene in Burkina Faso tomorrow. He's watching what happened in Libya, in Mali, in countries where external intervention was sold as stabilization but ended in chaos and dependency. And he's decided that the best way to protect his own revolution is to make sure other African nations don't fall into that same trap. So he's positioning himself as the counterforce, the leader willing to stand up when others bow down. The West African power structure is shifting in real time. For years, ECOWAS operated with the assumption that regional leaders would fall in line when called upon. But Traore represents a new generation of African leadership, one that rejects that assumption entirely. He's not asking for permission. He's not waiting for consensus. He's acting on principle, and that principle is non-negotiable. African sovereignty is not up for debate. What no one predicted was how quickly this would escalate. What no one saw coming was Traore stepping into the Benin crisis as a potential game-changer. And what no one can answer yet is whether his mobilization will deter foreign intervention or provoke it. Because if jets start flying and troops start moving, this won't be a limited operation. It'll be a regional war, fought not just over territory but over the future of independence itself. Benin's crisis just became Traore's test. If he backs down, it signals that revolutionary rhetoric has limits. If he follows through, it signals that West Africa's post-colonial power dynamics are being rewritten by force. And right now, the world is holding its breath, waiting to see which path he chooses. This wasn't just a military alert. This was a declaration. Traore came for sovereignty, and he's making sure everyone knows that any attempt to undermine it will be met with resistance. The jets may be circling Benin, but Traore just made sure they're also watching Burkina Faso. And that changes everything. The map is being redrawn, and most people don't even know it yet. Fighter jets from NATO and ECOWAS are now woven into the regional security fabric. Their presence no longer shocking but expected, normalized, militarized. What started as Benin's internal crisis has metastasized into something far more dangerous. A geopolitical standoff where every move carries continental consequences. A failed coup could invite intervention. A successful coup could trigger counterintervention. And a foreign-backed operation could ignite a conflict that doesn't stay contained within Benin's borders. Right now, West Africa is holding its breath, because the next 72 hours could determine whether this remains a crisis or becomes a war. This isn't just about Benin anymore. It never really was. The moment foreign jets entered the equation, the moment ECOWAS started coordinating with NATO, the moment intelligence assets began repositioning across the region, Benin stopped being a standalone crisis and became a proxy battleground. And the terrifying part? The people of Benin didn't choose this. They're caught in the middle of a power struggle that has everything to do with influence, resources, and ideology, and almost nothing to do with their actual demands for change. Their revolution is being hijacked in real time, and the forces doing the hijacking aren't even pretending to care about their voices anymore. The alliances forming in the shadows are what should terrify you. On one side, you have ECOWAS backed by Western military coordination, framing their involvement as stability operations, democracy protection, peacekeeping. On the other side, you have leaders like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, along with Mali and Niger, who see this as neo-colonial overreach dressed up in diplomatic language. These aren't just ideological differences. These are battle lines. And if Benin tips the wrong way, those lines could harden into something far more violent. Is this the spark that sets the Sahel ablaze? Or will cooler heads prevail? Drop your take, because the margin for error just disappeared. A failed coup in Benin would likely bring ECOWAS intervention, justified under the banner of constitutional order and democratic continuity. But intervention has a way of outlasting its welcome. Libya was supposed to be a quick operation. Mali's interventions were supposed to stabilize the country. Instead, they created power vacuums, extended conflicts, and deepened resentment toward foreign military presence. If ECOWAS moves into Benin with NATO backing, you can bet that Traoré and his allies will see it as proof that the old playbook is still in effect, that African sovereignty only matters when it aligns with Western interests. A successful coup, on the other hand, could embolden the anti-Western bloc. If Benin's government falls and a new regime takes power with populist, sovereignty-first rhetoric, it would mark another domino falling in the region. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all have experienced military takeovers that rejected French and Western influence. If Benin joins that list, the Sahel becomes a unified front of defiance, and that changes everything. ECOWAS loses credibility. Western influence loses leverage. And the power map of West Africa shifts dramatically toward a new axis that doesn't answer to Brussels or Washington. But here's the wild card: foreign intervention. If NATO-backed forces move openly, even under ECOWAS cover, it risks triggering a response from the counter-alliance. Traoré has already signaled readiness. Mali and Niger have shown they're willing to resist external pressure. And if those nations interpret intervention in Benin as a broader campaign to roll back recent gains, they could mobilize in ways that turn a national crisis into a regional war. That's not speculation. That's the logical consequence of the current trajectory. What no one expected was how quickly the pieces would fall into place. What no one predicted was how a crisis in one small West African nation could become the flashpoint for a much larger ideological and military confrontation. And what no one can control anymore is the momentum. Every actor involved has drawn their red lines. Every leader has calculated their risks. And every intelligence agency in the region is watching for the first move that triggers the cascade.